Picture this: November 8th, 1519. Emperor Moctezuma II stands on a causeway stretching across the shimmering waters of Lake Texcoco, watching strangers approach his island capital. These weren't ordinary visitors. They rode atop massive beasts never seen in this land, wore gleaming metal that turned obsidian blades, and commanded fire-spitting weapons that cracked like thunder. Behind them marched thousands of warriors from cities that hated Aztec rule. The emperor's advisors whispered conflicting counsel, some seeing gods, others seeing invaders. Moctezuma, ruler of the most powerful empire in Mesoamerican history, was about to make decisions that would reshape an entire civilization. But how did it come to this? How did the peoples of ancient Mexico and Central America build one of humanity's most sophisticated civilizations, only to watch it crumble in a single catastrophic encounter? This is the story of Mesoamerica, a cultural region stretching from central Mexico through Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, where indigenous peoples developed writing systems that recorded their history in stunning detail, mathematical concepts including the independent invention of zero, astronomical observations that predicted eclipses centuries in advance, and architectural achievements that rival anything built in the ancient world. For over 3,000 years before Europeans arrived, diverse civilizations rose and fell across this landscape. The mysterious Olmec, who carved colossal stone heads weighing 50 tons, the Maya, who built pyramid cities in dense jungle, the architects of Teotihuacan, who created the Western Hemisphere's largest ancient metropolis, and the Aztecs, who forged an empire through military conquest and tribute collection. But our story begins much earlier, when the last Ice Age glaciers retreated around 10,000 BC and transformed the Mesoamerican landscape forever. Small bands of hunter-gatherers watched as the massive mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats that had sustained their ancestors vanished from the earth. These people faced a fundamental choice: adapt or perish. What they chose would set in motion one of humanity's most important agricultural revolutions, the domestication of maize. This single achievement would make everything else possible, from the Olmec colossal heads to the Aztec Empire. The journey from scattered hunting bands to imperial civilizations took millennia of experimentation, innovation, and cultural development. Let's begin that journey together, starting with a tiny wild grass that would change everything. Imagine holding a cob of wild teosinte, ancestor of modern corn, in your hand. It's pathetically small, perhaps 20 millimeters long, containing maybe 8 to 12 tiny kernels that barely resemble the golden corn we know today. The seeds shatter easily when mature, an adaptive mechanism allowing natural dispersal. You'd need to gather hundreds of these to make a single meal. Yet somehow, over thousands of years of patient selection, Mesoamerican farmers transformed this unpromising grass into one of the world's most productive crops. How? Through observation, experimentation, and an understanding of plant genetics that wouldn't be matched by European science until the 19th century. The domestication process began around 7000 BC in the Tehuacan Valley, a semi-arid region in modern-day Mexico where concentrated human populations around reliable water sources created ideal conditions for intensive plant management. Archaeological excavations in caves like Tenochtitlan revealed an incredible sequence spanning thousands of years, with increasingly larger maize cobs preserved in dry conditions that would have destroyed such evidence elsewhere. Early farmers selected plants whose seeds remained attached to the cob, a trait that made harvesting efficient but rendered the plants entirely dependent on human intervention for reproduction. Generation by generation, kernel by kernel, they were engineering a new species, but maize didn't develop in isolation. Around 6000 BC, beans were being cultivated alongside the emerging corn, while squash domestication had begun even earlier, perhaps 8000 BC. These three crops, maize, beans and squash, would become known as the Three Sisters, forming the agricultural foundation of every major Mesoamerican civilization for the next 10,000 years. The symbiotic relationship wasn't immediately apparent to early farmers. Beans fix nitrogen in soil while maize provides structural support for climbing bean vines. Squash spreads along the ground, preventing weed growth while retaining soil moisture. Together they created a sustainable agricultural system that could feed dense populations without depleting the land. The people who figured this out weren't primitive. They were agricultural scientists conducting experiments across millennia. What happened next would transform these scattered farming communities into something unprecedented. By 1500 BC, something extraordinary was emerging along the humid Gulf Coast lowlands of southern Veracruz and western Tabasco. The Olmec, whose name derives from the Nahuatl word meaning rubber people, were creating Mesoamerica's first true civilization. We don't know what they called themselves. Their voices are silent, their language lost. But their achievements? Those speak louder than words. These people literally reshaped mountains, moved stones weighing 50 tons across 60 kilometers of rivers and swampland, and carved colossal heads with such individualized features that they must represent specific rulers. This wasn't primitive art. This was political propaganda on a monumental scale. San Lorenzo emerged around 1500 BC as the earliest major Olmec center, constructed on a plateau rising 150 feet above surrounding floodplains. But here's what's remarkable. That plateau wasn't entirely natural. Olmec engineers moved an estimated 2.3 million cubic feet of earth to create artificial ridges, platforms, and plazas. Think about that. Without wheeled vehicles, without draft animals, using only human labor and organizational genius, they moved enough earth to fill a modern football stadium multiple times over. This required coordinating thousands of workers over many decades, indicating sophisticated social organization and centralized authority unprecedented in Mesoamerican prehistory. Someone was in charge, someone possessed power that commanded absolute obedience. The colossal heads tell us who. 10 have been discovered at San Lorenzo, each weighing between 10 and 50 tons, standing up to 3.4 meters tall. Carved from basalt, quarried in the Tuxtla Mountains over 60 kilometers away, these massive sculptures represent individual rulers wearing distinctive helmets or headdresses. Each face is unique, one broad and thick-lipped, another more angular, with elaborate ear ornaments. They're portraits, not generic representations of authority. Recent experimental archaeology demonstrated that moving a 20-ton basalt block would require approximately 1,500 people working in coordinated teams, using wooden rollers, ropes, and rafts for river crossings. The logistics alone boggle the mind, but the Olmec achieved something even more impressive than moving stones. They created political and religious concepts that would echo through 3,000 years of Mesoamerican history. What happened next at San Lorenzo would shock even them. Around 1150 BC, something violent happened at San Lorenzo. Many monuments were deliberately mutilated and buried. Colossal heads were defaced, their features smashed beyond recognition. Much of the ceremonial architecture was abandoned. Archaeological evidence suggests this destruction resulted from internal conflict rather than external invasion, possibly dynastic warfare or social revolution. The systematic nature of monument destruction indicates that the perpetrators understood the symbolic importance of these sculptures and sought to eliminate their political and religious power. Imagine the scene: workers straining to topple massive stone heads, priests watching their sacred symbols defaced, a civilization literally destroying its own past. As San Lorenzo declined, La Venta emerged around 1000 BC as the new Olmec capital. Located on an island in the Tonala River, La Venta represented a quantum leap in architectural sophistication. The site was organized along a precise north-south axis with ceremonial structures arranged in a complex extending over 200 hectares. This axial planning, aligning buildings with cardinal directions and astronomical phenomena, would become fundamental to Mesoamerican urban design for the next 2,500 years, appearing at Teotihuacan, Monte Alban, and countless other sites. The Olmec were establishing urban planning principles that would outlive them by millennia. La Venta's most striking feature was the Great Pyramid, a fluted cone rising 34 meters above the surrounding landscape. Constructed entirely from clay and earth, this monument required approximately 800,000 cubic meters of fill material. That's more earth than San Lorenzo's entire plateau modification project. The pyramid's unique fluted design may have been inspired by nearby volcanic cones, connecting the monument to geological features that held religious significance. Beneath this massive structure, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary: elaborate offerings of serpentine blocks arranged in mosaic patterns representing stylized jaguar masks. These mosaics, measuring up to 4.5 by 6 meters, were carefully constructed, then immediately buried, suggesting they served ritual rather than decorative purposes. The serpentine came from Guerrero, over 350 kilometers away. Someone was coordinating trade networks spanning hundreds of kilometers just to obtain materials for offerings that nobody would ever see again. The Olmec relationship with the supernatural wasn't casual, it was obsessive. But their greatest legacy wasn't stone monuments or buried offerings. It was ideas that would spread like wildfire across Mesoamerica. The jaguar dominated Olmec religious imagination in ways that would shape Mesoamerican spirituality for millennia. These powerful predators appear everywhere in Olmec art, from naturalistic representations to highly stylized were-jaguar figures, combining human and feline characteristics. These supernatural beings display cleft heads, downturned mouths, and fanged teeth, representing entities associated with rain, fertility, and rulership. Why jaguars? In the dense tropical forests where the Olmec lived, jaguars were apex predators, mysterious, powerful, deadly. They moved between earth and water, hunted at night, and seemed to possess supernatural abilities. Olmec rulers claimed descent from or transformation into jaguar spirits, establishing precedents for divine kingship that would echo through Aztec emperors 2,500 years later. But the Olmec gave Mesoamerica something even more influential than jaguar symbolism: the feathered serpent. This deity, combining avian and reptilian characteristics, first appears in Olmec art as a supernatural being that would later become Kukulkan to the Maya and Quetzalcoatl to central Mexican peoples. Monument 19 at La Venta depicts a figure wearing a headdress featuring serpent and bird elements, establishing iconography that would maintain consistent associations with wind, rain, and divine authority across cultures and centuries. When you see feathered serpent imagery at Chichen Itza or Teotihuacan or the Aztec Templo Maya, you're looking at an idea born in Olmec minds over 2,500 years earlier. The Olmec also pioneered Mesoamerican calendar systems and mathematical notation. While the full long count calendar may not have reached final form until later periods, Olmec monuments display clear evidence of systematic timekeeping and astronomical observation. The bar and dot numerical notation system, fundamental to later Mesoamerican mathematics, appears in early form on Olmec monuments. This vigesimal, base 20 system would become standard throughout the region, enabling the complex calculations necessary for astronomical prediction and calendrical correlation. Stela C at Tres Zapotes bears the earliest confirmed long count date in Mesoamerica, corresponding to 32 BC. The Olmec weren't just building monuments, they were building intellectual frameworks that would structure how Mesoamericans understood time, space, and the cosmos for the next 3 millennia. But around 400 BC, Olmec civilization fragmented and declined. What happened next would scatter their innovations across an entire continent. Between 1000 BC and 250 AD, the Olmec legacy exploded across Mesoamerica during what archaeologists call the formative period. Distinct civilizations emerged across diverse landscapes: highland valleys, tropical rainforests, coastal plains, each adapting Olmec precedents to local conditions while developing unique architectural, artistic, and political traditions. In the highland valleys of Oaxaca, the Zapotec civilization was doing something audacious, building a city on a mountaintop. Around 500 BC, they founded Monte Alban on a flattened hilltop 400 meters above the valley floor. This wasn't gradual settlement growth, this was deliberate urban planning requiring massive landscape modification. Zapotec engineers leveled approximately 40 hectares of mountaintop terrain, removing an estimated 3.5 million cubic meters of bedrock and soil to create the Great Plaza and surrounding architectural complexes. Why choose such an impractical location? Water had to be carried uphill. Building materials had to be transported up steep slopes. Agriculture required terracing on mountainsides. The answer reveals sophisticated political thinking. This elevated position commanded panoramic views of three valleys while providing natural defensive advantages. Monte Alban wasn't just a city, it was a statement of power visible from everywhere in the region. You couldn't escape seeing it. You couldn't forget who controlled these valleys. The Great Plaza stretched 300 meters north-south and 200 meters east-west, creating one of Mesoamerica's largest public spaces. Surrounded by pyramidal platforms, palaces, and temple complexes, this plaza served as the ceremonial heart of Zapotec civilization and a stage for rituals that reinforced royal authority and cosmic order. But one building stands out for its unusual design. Building EJ, constructed in an arrow-like shape pointing southwest toward the star Capella. Its walls display over 40 carved slabs depicting conquered towns, each represented by a place glyph surmounted by an inverted human head symbolizing military defeat. These conquest slabs provide the earliest extensive historical records in Mesoamerica, documenting Zapotec military campaigns and territorial expansion. The Zapotec weren't shy about their achievements. They were literally carving their victories in stone for eternity to witness. But something even more sophisticated was emerging in the tropical lowlands to the east, a civilization that would achieve intellectual heights unmatched in the ancient Americas. Deep in the Petén rainforest of northern Guatemala, the Maya were constructing something that defies belief. El Mirador, occupied around 600 BC, emerged as possibly the largest city in the pre-Columbian Americas. The site's massive pyramidal complexes, connected by raised causeways extending for dozens of kilometers through dense jungle, demonstrate organizational capabilities that challenge every assumption about early Maya political development. The Danta Pyramid, El Mirador's largest structure, rises 72 meters above the forest floor and contains approximately 2.8 million cubic meters of stone and fill. That makes it one of the world's most voluminous ancient buildings, larger than many Egyptian pyramids. That sink in. In the middle of a tropical rainforest, using only stone tools and human labor, Maya engineers quarried and transported millions of limestone blocks to build a mountain. But why? What drove people to invest such enormous labor in constructing these monuments? The answer lies in Maya concepts of divine kingship and cosmic order. Pyramids weren't just buildings, they were artificial mountains representing the axis connecting earthly and supernatural realms. They were where gods descended to communicate with humans, where rulers performed ceremonies maintaining the universe's balance, where human sacrifice fed divine forces requiring nourishment to continue their cosmic functions. Building pyramids was literally supporting the structure of reality itself. If you didn't build them, if you didn't perform the rituals, if you didn't offer the sacrifices, the cosmos might collapse. El Mirador's urban layout demonstrates sophisticated planning adapted to tropical forest conditions. The city's core covers approximately 650 hectares, with monumental architecture clustered around large plazas connected by elevated causeways called sakbiob. These stone-paved roadways, raised 1 to 2 meters above surrounding terrain, provided dry passage during the rainy season while serving ceremonial functions related to Maya concepts of cosmic order. Nakbe, located 13 kilometers southeast of El Mirador, represents another early Maya urban center, with monumental construction beginning around 1000 BC. Structure 1 at Nakbe rises 45 meters above plaza level and features massive stone masks flanking its central stairway, some of the earliest examples of Maya architectural sculpture. These masks, representing supernatural beings or deified ancestors, established architectural traditions that would characterize Maya ceremonial buildings for over 1,000 years. But the Maya were developing something even more revolutionary than architecture. What happened next would change human intellectual history forever. While Monte Alban commanded the Oaxacan highlands and Maya cities rose in tropical forests, something unprecedented was emerging in the basin of Mexico's northeastern corner. Around 200 BC, refugees displaced by volcanic eruptions began settling near natural springs in an area that would become Teotihuacan, destined to become the largest city in the pre-Columbian Americas and one of the world's great ancient metropolises. The eruption of Zittel volcano around 50 BC buried Quiquilco, previously the basin's largest settlement, forcing populations to relocate. Those refugees chose wisely. Teotihuacan's location offered reliable water supplies, fertile alluvial soil, and nearby obsidian sources that would prove crucial for its later development. From the beginning, Teotihuacan was planned. The Street of the Dead, the city's main ceremonial avenue, was laid out along a precise north-south axis, oriented 15.5 degrees east of true north. This wasn't random. This orientation aligned the avenue with the setting of the Pleiades constellation, demonstrating astronomical knowledge and religious symbolism that connected urban planning with cosmic order. The avenue extended over 4 kilometers from the Pyramid of the Moon in the north to the Ciudadela complex in the south, creating one of ancient America's most impressive urban vistas. Walking down this avenue would have been an overwhelming experience. Pyramids towering on both sides, platforms and stairways breaking sight lines into manageable segments while maintaining overall unity, thousands of people going about their daily business in what was essentially a planned metropolis. The Pyramid of the Sun, built during the 1st century AD over a natural cave that held religious significance, rises 65 meters above the surrounding plaza and contains approximately 1.2 million cubic meters of stone, adobe, and fill. Its construction required quarrying and transporting millions of basalt blocks from sources several kilometers away, then precisely fitting these stones into a stable structure that has survived nearly 2 millennia of earthquakes and weathering. The pyramid's 4 sides align precisely with cardinal directions, while its base measurements of 225 meters square create proportional relationships that may have encoded astronomical or mathematical knowledge. But here's what makes Teotihuacan truly revolutionary. It wasn't just a ceremonial center. It was a real city where people lived, worked, raised families, and participated in an urban economy more complex than anything Mesoamerica had seen before. What came next would astound even modern urban planners. By 250 AD, Teotihuacan housed between 125,000 and 200,000 inhabitants within a carefully planned grid system covering over 20 square kilometers. This demographic concentration was unprecedented, a true metropolis requiring administrative innovations, economic specialization, and social organization that would influence city planning throughout ancient Mexico for centuries. But what made Teotihuacan unique wasn't just its size, it was how people lived. Unlike other Mesoamerican cities where elites clustered near ceremonial precincts while commoners lived in dispersed settlements, Teotihuacan integrated different social classes within a unified urban fabric through a distinctive apartment compound system. These compounds, standardized multifamily structures arranged around central courtyards, typically housed 60 to 100 individuals representing extended families or craft groups. Each compound included residential rooms, storage areas, workshops, and small temples serving their inhabitants' religious needs. The standardized construction reflects centralized planning and resource allocation that distinguished Teotihuacan from contemporary Mesoamerican cities. Walking through ancient Teotihuacan's residential districts, you'd see block after block of these apartment complexes, each following similar architectural principles, but with variations reflecting occupants' wealth and occupation. Some featured elaborate murals, others plain walls, some had spacious courtyards, others cramped ones. But the basic pattern remained consistent, a planned city built according to a unified vision. The city's economic foundation rested on sophisticated obsidian production that supplied markets throughout Mesoamerica. Teotihuacan controlled access to high-quality obsidian sources at Pachuca, located 50 kilometers northeast, where volcanic glass deposits provided raw materials for specialized craft production. The merchants' barrio in the city's western sector contained dozens of workshop complexes where skilled artisans transformed raw obsidian into finished products using sophisticated knapping techniques. A single workshop could produce thousands of obsidian blades per month, mass production in the ancient world. These blades, along with projectile points and ceremonial objects, were exported throughout Mesoamerica, making Teotihuacan obsidian a preferred trade good from Guatemala to northern Mexico. The city's merchants became wealthy and powerful, their trading expeditions extending hundreds of kilometers while gathering intelligence that served Teotihuacan's political interests. But the city's power wasn't built on economics alone. What happened at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent reveals a darker side to this glittering metropolis. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, located within the Ciudadela complex, represents the pinnacle of Teotihuacan's sculptural achievement through its elaborate facade decorated with over 200 carved stone heads alternating between feathered serpents and a deity with goggle-like eyes. These serpent heads, each weighing approximately 4 tons, project from the temple's sloping walls in three-dimensional relief, creating dramatic shadow patterns throughout the day. The carving's intricacy, individual feather details, scaled skin textures, ornamental elements, required master craftsmen working with specialized stone tools. Originally, the entire facade blazed with brilliant pigments, red cinnabar, blue azurite, yellow ochre, creating a polychromatic display visible from great distances. But beneath this beautiful temple lies something horrifying. Archaeological investigations revealed mass burial deposits containing over 200 sacrificial victims, many identified as warriors by their distinctive obsidian projectile points and military regalia. These individuals appear to have been captured enemies or willing participants in dedication ceremonies, their deaths sanctifying the temple's construction and ensuring divine protection for the city. The burials were arranged in specific patterns with hands bound behind backs, accompanied by elaborate offerings including jade ornaments and ceramic vessels. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic state-sponsored ritual murder on a massive scale. Imagine the scene, hundreds of captives waiting their turn, priests wielding obsidian blades, the pyramid steps running with blood, while crowds watched from surrounding plazas. This was religious ceremony as political theater. demonstrating Teotihuacan's power through spectacular displays of violence. Teotihuacan's influence extended far beyond the Basin of Mexico through diplomatic, military, and commercial networks connecting it with major centers throughout Mesoamerica. Archaeological evidence indicates Teotihuacan maintained direct political control or significant influence over sites as distant as Caminaljuyu in highland Guatemala and Monte Alban in Oaxaca. At Tikal, the largest Maya city during the early Classic period, Teotihuacan influence appears dramatically around 378 AD when a ruler named Siaj-Kak arrived, possibly as a Teotihuacan representative or ally. Subsequent Tikal rulers adopted Teotihuacan-style regalia while continuing to use Maya hieroglyphic writing and calendrical systems. Teotihuacan was exporting not just obsidian blades, but political ideologies, religious concepts, and cultural practices across vast distances. For over 400 years, this city dominated Mesoamerica economically, politically, and culturally. Then, around 650 AD, everything collapsed. What happened next would reshape the entire region. Around 650 AD, Teotihuacan burned. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic destruction through coordinated burning that targeted administrative buildings, elite residences, and religious complexes, while leaving many residential areas relatively intact. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was deliberately defaced, its sculptural facade smashed and buried beneath layers of rubble, suggesting ritualized termination rather than random violence. Apartment compounds throughout the city show evidence of hasty abandonment, with valuable objects left in place and storage rooms sealed as if inhabitants expected to return. They never did. Within a century, the greatest metropolis in the pre-Columbian Americas had become a ghost town. What caused this catastrophe? Climate data indicates the 7th century experienced increased aridity in central Mexico, reducing agricultural productivity and straining water resources that supported the massive population. Internal social tensions may have intensified as economic pressures mounted, while external military threats from northern groups placed additional stress on Teotihuacan's political system. The collapse wasn't sudden. It was a cascading failure where multiple problems compounded each other until the entire system broke down. Imagine living through those final decades, crops failing, water supplies dwindling, political authority fragmenting, violence erupting in streets that had known peace for centuries. The psychological trauma must have been immense. The power vacuum created by Teotihuacan's fall enabled new regional centers to emerge. Xochicalco rose in the hills of western Morelos around 700 AD, its strategic location controlling trade routes between central Mexico and regions to the south. The site's founders chose a naturally defensible hilltop position requiring extensive terracing and fortification. Military considerations had become paramount in urban planning. Xochicalco's Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent demonstrates sophisticated architectural planning and iconographic innovation, synthesizing influences from multiple Mesoamerican traditions. So the structure's talud tablero construction technique derived from Teotihuacan architectural principles, but its sculptural program incorporated Maya-style hieroglyphic inscriptions, Zapotec calendrical symbols, and Gulf Coast iconographic elements, suggesting intensive cultural exchange. The pyramid's facades display carved reliefs depicting seated figures wearing elaborate headdresses and manipulating calendrical symbols, possibly representing a pan-Mesoamerican conference of astronomers and rulers convened to correlate different regional calendar systems. From Teotihuacan's ashes, new civilizations were rising, but the most dramatic developments were occurring in the tropical lowlands where Maya civilization was reaching its golden age. Tikal emerged as the most powerful Maya center during the Classic period. Its towering pyramid temples, rising above the forest canopy like artificial mountains, proclaiming royal authority across vast territories. The city's rulers traced their lineage to Yax-eb-Zuk, a semi-mythical founder who established the dynasty around 90 AD. Temple 4, completed during the 8th century, reached a height of 65 meters above the forest floor, one of the tallest pre-Columbian structures in the Americas and visible from neighboring centers dozens of kilometers away. Standing atop this pyramid, Maya rulers could literally look down on the world, positioned between earth and sky, mediating between human communities and supernatural forces. Maya political organization centered on divine kingship, where rulers claimed descent from supernatural ancestors and maintained cosmic order through ritual performance, military conquest, and architectural patronage. The Maya term Kuhul Ajau, meaning divine lord, designated these sacred monarchs who served as intermediaries between human communities and the supernatural realm. Royal authority derived not from secular political power alone, but from religious sanction requiring constant validation through ceremonial activities, successful warfare, and completion of monumental construction projects demonstrating divine favor. This created enormous pressure on rulers, failed to win battles, failed to complete monuments, failed to perform rituals correctly, and divine favor might withdraw. Legitimacy was earned, not inherited. Palenque developed distinctive architectural traditions reflecting local environmental conditions and cultural preferences. And the city's location on limestone terraces overlooking the Usumacinta River Valley provided natural defensive advantages and abundant water supplies, but required sophisticated engineering solutions for construction on sloping terrain. Palenque's architects perfected corbelled vaulting systems, creating interior spaces of unprecedented size and elegance, while decorative programs combined stucco sculpture with painted murals, achieving remarkable artistic sophistication. The Temple of the Inscriptions houses the elaborate tomb of Kinich Janab Pakal, discovered by Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz-Luille in 1952 after 4 years of excavation through rubble-filled passages leading deep into the pyramid's interior. The burial chamber, carved from solid limestone and sealed with a massive sarcophagus lid weighing over 5 tons, contained the ruler's remains surrounded by jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and ceramic vessels accompanying his journey to the underworld. The sarcophagus lid displays one of Maya art's most complex iconographic programs depicting the deceased king's transformation into the maize god while falling into the jaws of the earth monster, symbolizing death and regeneration. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a theological statement carved in stone. Copan emerged as the Maya world's premier center for astronomical observation and mathematical calculation, its scribal schools producing some of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated intellectual achievements. The city's hieroglyphic stairway contains over 2,500 individual glyphs arranged in 63 steps, creating the longest Maya inscription known to archaeology. This monumental text records the complete dynastic history of Copan's ruling lineage while incorporating complex calculations demonstrating advanced mathematical knowledge and astronomical precision. Walking up these stairs, you'd be literally climbing through history, each step recounting battles, coronations, religious ceremonies, and astronomical events spanning centuries. Maya mathematical achievements included the independent invention of the concept of zero and development of positional notation systems enabling complex astronomical calculations. Maya mathematicians used a vigesimal, base 20 counting system represented through combinations of dots and bars with shell symbols indicating zero values in positional notation. This mathematical system enabled calculations involving millions of days and precise predictions of astronomical events, including solar eclipses, lunar cycles, and planetary movements. The long count calendar provided Maya astronomers with a linear chronological framework capable of recording dates across thousands of years while maintaining precise correlation with cyclical calendars used for ritual and agricultural purposes. Venus held particular significance in Maya astronomy and religious practice, its synodic cycle of 584 days providing the basis for warfare scheduling and ceremonial timing. Maya astronomers calculated Venus's cycle with extraordinary precision, determining its average length as 583.92 days compared to the modern astronomical value of 583.193 days. And that's accurate to within minutes per century, achieved without telescopes, without computers, using only naked eye observations recorded across generations. The Dresden Codex contains Venus tables that predict the planet's heliacal rising, dates across centuries, enabling rulers to coordinate military campaigns and religious ceremonies with favorable astronomical conditions. These weren't primitive stargazers, these were scientists conducting systematic observations and calculations rivaling anything in the ancient world. The development of Maya hieroglyphic writing evolved from earlier Mesoamerican symbolic traditions, but achieved unprecedented complexity through integration of logographic and syllabic elements in fully grammatical texts. Maya scribes used approximately 800 distinct hieroglyphic signs, including logograms representing complete words, syllabograms representing individual sounds, and determinatives clarifying meaning or pronunciation. This mixed writing system enabled recording of complete spoken language with grammatical structures, verb conjugations, and syntactic relationships, providing detailed insight into ancient Maya thought and expression. But all this intellectual brilliance, all these magnificent cities, all this political power, it was about to collapse in one of history's most mysterious catastrophes. Around 800 AD, something went catastrophically wrong in the Maya lowlands. Major centers throughout the southern region began experiencing political collapse. Monumental construction ceased, hieroglyphic inscriptions stopped. Populations declined dramatically or disappeared entirely as people abandoned cities that had been occupied for over 1,000 years. Tikal's last dated monument was erected in 869 AD. Palenque ceased major construction around 800 AD. Copan's final inscription dates to 822 AD. One by one, like lights going out across a darkened landscape, the great Maya cities fell silent. What caused this collapse? Multiple factors contributed to this demographic and political crisis. Environmental degradation played a crucial role. Deforestation and soil erosion reduced agricultural productivity, while prolonged droughts, documented through climate data, stressed water supplies and forced population movements that destabilized political relationships. Archaeological evidence suggests that warfare intensified during the late Classic period, possibly contributing to the political fragmentation and demographic decline. But it wasn't just environmental or military problems. The very success of classic Maya civilization contained seeds of its own destruction. The political system's emphasis on constant monument construction, military campaigns to capture sacrificial victims, and elaborate ceremonies to maintain cosmic order created unsustainable demands on economic resources and human labor. Imagine being a Maya farmer during these final decades. You're required to pay tribute in agricultural products while providing labor for construction projects and military campaigns. Crop yields are declining due to environmental degradation. Your children are hungry. Political elites demand ever more tribute while promising that increased sacrifices will restore divine favor. But nothing works. The rains don't come, the crops fail, your neighbors are moving away seeking better conditions elsewhere. Social trust breaks down, long-standing political alliances fracture, warfare becomes endemic. Eventually you make the hardest decision of your life. Abandon the city where your ancestors lived for generations and seek survival elsewhere. Despite the southern lowland collapse, Maya civilization continued flourishing in northern Yucatan and highland Guatemala, where centers like Chichen Itza and Mayapan maintained urban populations and monumental construction programs through the post-classic period. These northern centers developed distinctive architectural styles and political organizations incorporating influences from central Mexico while maintaining recognizably Maya cultural traditions. The Maya didn't disappear, they transformed, but the classic period's golden age was over. Meanwhile, in central Mexico, new powers were rising from Teotihuacan's ashes. What emerged next would create precedents that would echo all the way to the Aztec Empire. Rising from Teotihuacan's ruins around 900 AD, the Toltecs constructed a new model of Mesoamerican civilization, emphasizing military prowess, long-distance trade, and systematic exportation of cultural practices across unprecedented geographical distances. Tula emerged as the Toltec capital in the northern basin of Mexico, its location commanding strategic advantages while providing access to obsidian sources, agricultural land, and trade routes connecting central Mexico with northern regions. Unlike earlier urban centers developing gradually through population aggregation, Tula was established as a planned capital designed to project military power and political authority across vast distances. The city's core ceremonial precinct covered approximately 14 square kilometers and housed an estimated 30,000 to 60,000 inhabitants at its peak. Tula's urban layout followed principles established at Teotihuacan, but incorporated significant modifications reflecting changed political priorities and military requirements. The main ceremonial plaza measured 140 meters on each side, surrounded by pyramid temples, palace complexes, and administrative buildings arranged according to astronomical alignments. Temple B, known as the Temple of Tlahuizcalpantecutli, or Temple of the Morning Star, dominated Tula's skyline, serving as the primary venue for royal ceremonies and religious observances. The temple's most distinctive architectural feature consisted of massive stone columns carved as warriors standing at attention with atlatls, obsidian clubs, and round shields decorated with astronomical symbols. These Atlantean figures, measuring 4.6 meters in height, originally supported wooden roof beams, creating interior space for royal ceremonies. Each warrior column displays individualized facial features, costume details, and equipment variations, suggesting portraiture of specific military leaders or supernatural beings associated with warfare. These columns established an architectural tradition that would spread throughout Mesoamerica, appearing at Chichen Itza in Yucatan and other sites influenced by Toltec cultural practices. The legend of Tzeacatl Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl represents one of Mesoamerica's most complex mythological narratives, combining historical events with religious symbolism. According to later Aztec sources, this ruler emphasized peaceful governance, artistic patronage, and ritual observance rather than military conquest and human sacrifice. His reign, around 980 AD, initiated a golden age of prosperity and cultural achievement. But increasing conflict with rival factions favoring traditional military practices, including human sacrifice and territorial expansion through warfare, led to his abdication and departure eastward toward the Gulf Coast. This legend preserves memories of actual political conflicts at Tula, while establishing religious precedents that would influence Mesoamerican kingship for centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests violent destruction followed by architectural modifications, possibly indicating dynastic change. But the most dramatic impact of Toltec civilization would occur far from Tula itself, in the Maya lands of Yucatan. Around 950 AD, groups associated with Toltec political and military systems established control over Chichen Itza, transforming this previously minor Maya center into one of Mesoamerica's most architecturally sophisticated cities, while creating new syntheses of Central Mexican and Maya cultural traditions. The transformation involved massive construction programs introducing Central Mexican architectural elements adapted to local conditions. The Great Ball Court, measuring 168 meters in length and 70 meters in width, so became the largest playing surface in ancient Mesoamerica, while incorporating acoustic properties that amplified sounds throughout the ceremonial precinct. The Temple of Kukulkan, Chichen Itza's most famous pyramid, demonstrates sophisticated integration of Toltec architectural principles with Maya mathematical and astronomical knowledge. The structure rises in 9 terrace levels with staircases on all 4 sides, creating a total of 365 steps corresponding to the days of the solar year. During spring and autumn equinoxes, shadow patterns on the northern staircase create the illusion of a serpent descending from the pyramid summit to its base, connecting architectural design with astronomical phenomena in ways that celebrated both Toltec religious symbolism and Maya calendrical precision. And this wasn't just a building. It was a calendar made of stone, an astronomical observatory, and a religious temple, all combined into one magnificent structure. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza became a pilgrimage destination, attracting visitors from throughout Mesoamerica who cast offerings of gold, jade, obsidian, and other precious materials into the natural limestone sinkhole. Dredging operations conducted during the early 20th century recovered thousands of artifacts, including gold discs decorated with repoussé scenes depicting Toltec Maya military campaigns, ritual activities, and mythological narratives. These objects demonstrate the wealth flowing through Chichen Itza's commercial networks while illustrating artistic synthesis characterizing Toltec-influenced material culture. But around 1200 AD, Tula experienced violent destruction. The city was systematically burned, monuments were defaced, and populations scattered. Toltec hegemony collapsed, ushering in an era of remarkable regional diversity, where distinct civilizations developed sophisticated political systems while maintaining connections through trade, warfare, and diplomatic exchange. In the mountainous highlands of Michoacán, one group, the Purepecha, was constructing an empire that would become the only major Mesoamerican power capable of successfully resisting Aztec military expansion. Their secret weapon? Metallurgy. The Purepecha Empire emerged during the 13th century through military conquest and political consolidation that united previously independent communities under centralized royal authority centered on the island capital of Tzintzuntzan in Lake Pátzcuaro. Unlike other Mesoamerican civilizations, developing gradually, the Purepecha Empire rose rapidly through systematic military campaigns enabled by one crucial advantage: metal weapons. While their neighbors fought with obsidian-edged clubs and wooden spears, Purepecha warriors carried copper-headed spears, axes and clubs that could penetrate traditional cotton armor and wooden shields. This metallurgical superiority proved decisive in battle after battle. Purepecha metallurgical achievements surpassed those of any other Mesoamerican civilization. Craftsmen developed sophisticated techniques for working copper, silver, gold, and bronze through processes including casting, hammering, annealing, and alloying, requiring specialized knowledge of metal properties, furnace construction, and temperature control. The empire's copper mines in the Sierra Madre Occidental provided raw materials for tool production, giving Purepecha armies significant advantages over enemies equipped with traditional stone weapons. This wasn't just marginal improvement, it was revolutionary military technology that fundamentally altered the balance of power in western Mexico. The Battle of Taximaroa around 1480 AD demonstrated Purepecha military capabilities when their forces decisively defeated an Aztec army led by Axayacatl, inflicting casualties that forced the Aztecs to abandon territorial ambitions in western Mexico. Purepecha warriors used copper-tipped spears and axes to devastating effect against Aztec forces equipped with traditional obsidian weapons, while knowledge of local terrain enabled tactical maneuvers, maximizing their technological advantages. The victory established the Purépecha Empire as the only major Mesoamerican power capable of successfully resisting Aztec military expansion, a remarkable achievement given the overwhelming military power the Aztecs were building to their east. Purépecha religious practices centered on worship of Purikaweri, the fire god, whose cult provided ideological foundations for royal authority and military conquest. The deity's association with volcanic activity and metallurgical processes connected religious symbolism with the empire's technological achievements and geographical characteristics. Ceremonial centers featured perpetual fires maintained by specialized priests who conducted rituals involving sacrifice of captured enemies and offering of precious metals, while the Purépecha built their empire in the west. Something even more powerful was emerging in the basin of Mexico, a confederation that would dominate Mesoamerica through military conquest and tribute extraction on an unprecedented scale. The Aztecs were rising. The Aztecs arrived in the basin of Mexico during the 13th century as one of several Chichimec groups migrating southward from arid regions of northern Mexico. These immigrants were looked down upon by established central Mexican peoples, considered barbarians, outsiders, wanderers without proper civilization. They initially occupied marginal positions within the competitive political landscape, serving as mercenaries for established city-states. But the Aztecs possessed something their more civilized neighbors lacked: an unshakable belief in their divine destiny and a willingness to do whatever necessary to achieve it. Tenochtitlan's founding around 1325 AD on an island in Lake Texcoco represented strategic adaptation to the basin of Mexico's lacustrine environment while providing defensive advantages. Legend says they were guided to this location by their god Huitzilopochtli, who instructed them to settle where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent. Whether divine guidance or practical calculation, the choice proved brilliant. The island location required sophisticated hydraulic engineering to create habitable land through chinampa construction, drainage systems, and freshwater supply networks, but it also made the city nearly impregnable to attack, while enabling control over lake transportation routes. The Aztec rise to power accelerated dramatically in 1428 AD when they formed the Triple Alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan. Successfully rebelling against Azcapotzalco, the Tepanec city-state that had previously dominated the basin of Mexico through tribute extraction and military intimidation. Under leadership of Itzcoatl of Tenochtitlan and his nephew Tlacaelel, the Allied forces decisively defeated the Tepanec Empire, redistributing territorial control and establishing new frameworks for imperial administration that would govern central Mexico for nearly a century. But this was just the beginning. The Triple Alliance's structure reflected pragmatic political calculations, with Tenochtitlan assuming dominant authority over military campaigns and tribute collection, while Texcoco provided administrative expertise and Tlacopan served as junior partner. Archaeological evidence from tribute lists indicates Tenochtitlan received approximately 60% of collected revenues, Texcoco claimed 30%, and Tlacopan retained the remaining 10%, proportions reflecting actual political influence. The stage was set for imperial expansion on a scale Mesoamerica had never witnessed. What the Aztecs built over the next 90 years would be magnificent, terrifying, and ultimately doomed. The empire that began on a swampy island would come to control territories from the Pacific to the Atlantic, extracting tribute from over 400 subject communities. But its very success would create the conditions for its catastrophic collapse. Aztec military expansion proceeded systematically through combination of diplomatic pressure, economic incentives, and armed conquest. Local rulers who submitted voluntarily retained authority over internal affairs, while accepting tributary obligations and military cooperation requirements. Communities that resisted faced devastating military campaigns followed by installation of Aztec governors, tribute collectors, and garrison forces ensuring compliance. This wasn't random violence, it was calculated imperial policy designed to maximize resource extraction while minimizing administrative costs. The conquest of the Huastec region around 1450 AD demonstrated Aztec military capabilities on unprecedented scale. Moctezuma Ilhuicamina coordinated a multi-pronged campaign involving approximately 200,000 warriors drawn from throughout Triple Alliance territories, supported by extensive supply networks transporting food, weapons, and equipment across hundreds of kilometers of difficult terrain. The Huastec cities of Tuxpan and Tamuhi fell after prolonged sieges, showcasing Aztec innovations in siege warfare. The conquest aftermath involved systematic destruction of Huastec religious centers, execution of captured nobles, and imposition of tribute obligations, transferring substantial wealth to Tenochtitlan while demonstrating imperial power to potential enemies. By the early 16th century, Tenochtitlan had transformed from an island refuge into a metropolis housing between 200,000 and 300,000 inhabitants, larger than any European city of that era, except possibly Constantinople. The city's expansion required continuous land reclamation through chinampa construction, extending the original island's boundaries while creating agricultural zones feeding the growing population. These artificial islands, constructed from alternating layers of lake sediment, organic waste, and vegetation, created raised planting surfaces surrounded by drainage canals, providing irrigation water and transportation access, while supporting fish and waterfowl, supplementing agricultural production. The Templo Mayor dominated Tenochtitlan's ceremonial center, its twin pyramids rising approximately 60 meters above the Great Plaza. The northern pyramid dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god essential for agricultural fertility, the southern pyramid honoring Huitzilopochtli, patron deity of warfare and imperial expansion. The structure's orientation aligned with astronomical phenomena, including the spring equinox, when sun rose directly between the two temple summits. But what happened at this temple, particularly during dedication ceremonies, would shock even contemporary Mesoamerican observers accustomed to ritual violence. The 1487 dedication allegedly involved sacrifice of thousands of captives over 4 days, with victims' hearts offered to deities while bodies were thrown down pyramid steps. Whether propaganda or reality, it reveals how the Aztecs understood power as something requiring constant feeding with human blood. Aztec tribute collection systems created economic networks channeling wealth from throughout Mesoamerica to Tenochtitlan. The Codex Mendoza and other tribute lists document systematic extraction of resources including agricultural products, craft goods, raw materials, and human labor from over 400 subject communities distributed across diverse ecological zones. Annual tribute obligations were calculated based on communities' productive capacity and strategic importance. Agricultural tribute included maize, beans, chili peppers, cacao beans, and cotton, supplying urban populations. Craft goods included textiles, ceramic vessels, obsidian tools, and feathered ornaments demonstrating technical skills. Raw materials, jade, turquoise, gold, exotic feathers, enabled specialized craftsmen in Tenochtitlan to produce elaborate ceremonial objects and royal regalia, visually reinforcing social hierarchies. But this system contained fatal weaknesses. Subject communities resented tribute obligations and military service requirements. The empire's rapid expansion had created administrative overextension. Many recently conquered territories remained barely pacified, requiring constant military pressure to maintain compliance. The Tlaxcalans, surrounded by Aztec territory but never fully conquered, represented a constant irritation and potential threat. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1519, they would find eager allies among peoples who hated Aztec domination. Moctezuma Xocoyotzin faced mounting challenges when Hernán Cortés landed on the Veracruz coast in February 1519 with approximately 500 men, 16 horses, and several cannon. The timing proved crucial as the emperor confronted rebellious provinces, succession disputes, and religious uncertainties that paralyzed effective response to this unprecedented threat. Religious prophecies concerning Quetzalcoatl's return complicated political calculations. Some interpretations suggested Cortés might represent the returning deity whose authority superseded earthly rulers. Moctezuma's advisors remained divided about appropriate responses to visitors who possessed supernatural characteristics while displaying obvious military capabilities and territorial ambitions. The emperor's decision to receive Spanish forces as honored guests while maintaining military readiness reflected sophisticated diplomatic strategies designed to assess European intentions while preserving options for peaceful resolution or military action. The accommodation of Spanish forces within the palace complex of Axayacatl provided opportunities for close observation of European capabilities while demonstrating Aztec wealth and power through architectural grandeur, artistic achievements, and ceremonial displays. But this diplomatic gamble would prove catastrophic. Moctezuma was about to make the worst decision of his life and doom an empire in the process. Moctezuma's captivity, accomplished through Spanish treachery during a diplomatic meeting in November 1519, represented a calculated gamble that Aztec political systems could be controlled through manipulation of royal authority. Cortés correctly understood that Mesoamerican political legitimacy depended on divine kingship concepts requiring physical presence and ceremonial performance to maintain effectiveness. By controlling the emperor's person while forcing him to continue governing through Spanish direction, the conquistadors attempted to preserve existing administrative systems while redirecting their benefits toward European interests. The strategy worked initially. Moctezuma continued receiving tribute, conducting religious ceremonies, and issuing governmental decrees while under Spanish supervision, creating the illusion of continuity that prevented immediate rebellion. But Spanish demands for gold, territorial concessions, and religious conversion increasingly conflicted with Aztec political traditions and popular expectations of royal behavior. The pressure was building toward explosion. The Toxcatl massacre of May 1520, perpetrated by Pedro de Alvarado during Cortés's absence in Veracruz, shattered any possibility of peaceful Spanish-Aztec coexistence. Alvarado's forces attacked unarmed participants in a religious ceremony dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, killing hundreds of nobles, priests, and commoners gathered in the Templo Maya precinct for ritual observances. The massacre's timing during sacred ceremonies added religious sacrilege to political betrayal, transforming Spanish presence from unwelcome occupation into existential threat requiring total resistance. The uprising that followed revealed the depth of indigenous hostility building during months of Spanish occupation, tribute extraction, and religious persecution. Aztec forces, coordinated by military leaders, launched attacks against Spanish positions throughout Tenochtitlan while cutting off supply lines and communication with indigenous allies. Moctezuma's death during the uprising remains historically controversial, Spanish sources claiming he was killed by stones thrown by his own people when he attempted to restore order, while indigenous accounts suggest Spanish execution when his usefulness ended. Either way, the emperor was dead, and with him died any hope of compromise. La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows of June 30, 1520, witnessed Spanish evacuation from Tenochtitlan under conditions nearly resulting in complete European defeat. Spanish forces, burdened with looted gold and hampered by wounded personnel, attempted to escape across Lake Texcoco using portable bridges while under constant attack from Aztec warriors employing war canoes, projectile weapons, and coordinated infantry assaults. The retreat's high casualties included loss of most Spanish horses and artillery. Cortés reportedly wept beneath a tree as he surveyed his shattered forces, but he wasn't finished, not even close. Cuauhtémoc's succession as final Aztec emperor around December 1520 represented indigenous determination to continue resistance despite overwhelming challenges posed by disease, military defeat, and political fragmentation. The young ruler possessed military experience and popular support necessary for organizing continued resistance, but he lacked time and resources for effective strategic planning. His reign would coincide with Spanish preparations for systematic siege operations that would exploit European tactical advantages while minimizing risks associated with urban combat in unfamiliar environments. But before military campaigns could resume, a more devastating weapon was already at work: smallpox. The epidemic that swept through Tenochtitlan in late 1520 killed thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of indigenous people, while leaving Spanish forces largely unaffected due to childhood exposure and acquired immunity. The disease's impact transcended immediate mortality to create social disruption, economic collapse, and political paralysis, undermining organized resistance more effectively than military campaigns. Archaeological evidence from Tenochtitlan reveals mass burial sites from this period with skeletal remains showing characteristic smallpox lesions and demographic patterns indicating mortality rates exceeding 40% in some neighborhoods. The siege of Tenochtitlan, beginning in May 1521, represented the largest military operation in the Americas to that date, involving approximately 900 Spanish soldiers, supported by over 100,000 indigenous allies drawn from throughout central Mexico. Cortés's strategy combined European siege techniques with indigenous military capabilities and local knowledge to create overwhelming force concentrations while preventing Aztec resupply or reinforcement from mainland territories. The construction of 13 brigantines for naval operations on Lake Texcoco provided crucial tactical advantages by enabling Spanish forces to control water transportation and attack the city from multiple directions simultaneously. Indigenous allies, particularly Tlaxcalans who contributed approximately 50,000 warriors, provided essential numerical strength, logistical support, and tactical knowledge enabling Spanish success while pursuing their own political objectives of liberation from Aztec dominance. These allies maintained their own military organizations and leadership hierarchies while accepting Spanish coordination and technological support. The siege's duration, extending from May through August 1521, reflected both Aztec defensive capabilities and logistical challenges of maintaining large military forces in hostile territory. But the outcome was inevitable. Superior European military technology combined with overwhelming numerical superiority from indigenous allies and devastating impact of epidemic disease created insurmountable odds. Tenochtitlan was doomed. Systematic destruction of Tenochtitlan's infrastructure formed central element of Spanish siege strategy. European forces demolished buildings, filled canals and destroyed chinampas to eliminate defensive positions while demonstrating determination to achieve complete victory, regardless of cultural or economic costs. This wasn't just military necessity, it was deliberate policy designed to break Aztec will to resist through destruction of everything they held sacred. Temples burned, palaces crumbled, chinampas were systematically dismantled. The jewel of Mesoamerica was being reduced to rubble. The final assault on Tlatelolco Market District in August 1521 witnessed desperate Aztec resistance as defending forces, weakened by months of siege, disease, and starvation, attempted to prevent complete Spanish victory through sacrificial determination and religious conviction. Archaeological excavations in the market area have revealed evidence of the final battles, including Spanish weapons, indigenous defensive works, and mass burial sites, documenting the conquest's human costs. Skeletal remains show evidence of malnutrition, disease, and violent trauma, illustrating the siege's devastating impact on civilian populations trapped within the city. Cuauhtémoc's capture on August 13, 1521, marked the formal end of Aztec political independence and the beginning of Spanish colonial administration throughout central Mexico. The emperor's torture, intended to reveal hidden treasure locations, demonstrated European priorities that emphasized immediate wealth extraction over political stability or indigenous welfare. His eventual execution in 1525 eliminated the last legitimate focus for indigenous resistance, while providing clear evidence of Spanish intentions regarding traditional political authorities and cultural institutions. The conquest's immediate aftermath witnessed systematic Spanish efforts to locate and confiscate indigenous wealth while establishing administrative structures for territorial control and resource extraction. Spanish destruction of indigenous codices represented one of history's most devastating episodes of cultural annihilation, eliminating thousands of manuscripts containing historical, religious, scientific, and literary information accumulated over centuries of Mesoamerican intellectual development. Diego de Landa's burning of Maya codices in Yucatan and similar destruction throughout central Mexico reflected European determination to eliminate indigenous religious practices while demonstrating fundamental incomprehension of native intellectual achievements. What was lost can never be recovered. An entire civilization's accumulated knowledge burned because Europeans thought it was devil worship. But indigenous peoples didn't simply disappear. They adapted, resisted, and preserved what they could within colonial frameworks. Indigenous demographic collapse continued throughout the 16th century as epidemic diseases, forced labor, tribute extraction, and social disruption combined to reduce native populations by an estimated 80–90% from pre-conquest levels. Smallpox, typhus, measles, and other European diseases spread rapidly through indigenous communities lacking immunity, while Spanish colonial policies prevented effective responses through traditional medical practices and social support systems. The demographic catastrophe created labor shortages that prompted increased African slave importation, while fundamentally altering the ethnic composition of colonial society. But within this catastrophe, indigenous peoples developed various strategies for preserving cultural traditions and political autonomy within colonial frameworks. Many communities maintain traditional governance structures, religious practices, and economic systems operating parallel to Spanish institutions. Communities successfully petitioned for legal recognition of traditional land rights, political authorities, and cultural practices while adapting to colonial requirements through selective adoption of European elements. These adaptation strategies enabled cultural survival while creating hybrid institutions combining indigenous and European characteristics. Cultural syncretism emerged as indigenous communities adapted traditional practices to colonial circumstances while incorporating European elements that provided protection from persecution or enhanced cultural effectiveness. The Virgin of Guadalupe cult, developing around 1531, combined Christian religious symbolism with indigenous goddess traditions in ways that provided spiritual comfort while enabling cultural preservation through acceptable European religious forms. Archaeological evidence indicates that indigenous communities maintain traditional ceremonial practices in concealed locations while participating in Christian observances required by colonial authorities. The establishment of indigenous schools and training of native scribes enabled preservation of traditional knowledge through European writing systems while creating new forms of cultural expression, combining indigenous content with colonial literary forms. Documents produced by indigenous scribes, including the Florentine Codex compiled by Bernardino de Sahagún, preserve detailed information about pre-conquest society while demonstrating intellectual capabilities of native scholars and their contributions to colonial knowledge systems. Now, these weren't passive victims, they were active participants in determining how their culture would survive within radically transformed circumstances. The collision between worlds that began in 1519 created profound transformations extending far beyond military conquest to encompass every aspect of human experience. But indigenous Mesoamerican civilization didn't die. It transformed, adapted, and endured. By 1600 AD, colonial society that emerged from the Spanish conquest had fundamentally transformed Mesoamerican civilization while preserving essential elements of indigenous culture within new institutional frameworks. The demographic catastrophe, cultural destruction, and political subordination characterizing the conquest's immediate aftermath had given way to more stable colonial relationships enabling indigenous survival and cultural adaptation. However, foundations established during this transformative century would continue shaping Mexican and Central American societies for centuries to come. Spanish colonial administration evolved gradually from initial military occupation toward more systematic governance structures, incorporating indigenous political traditions while serving European economic interests. The establishment of viceroyalties, audiencias, and municipal governments created hierarchical administrative systems extending Spanish authority throughout conquered territories while providing mechanisms for indigenous participation in colonial governance. However, these institutions consistently privileged European interests over indigenous welfare while limiting native political autonomy and cultural expression. The encomienda system's gradual replacement by hacienda agriculture and repartimiento, labor drafts, reflected Spanish adaptation to colonial conditions while maintaining exploitative relationships with indigenous communities. Large agricultural estates produced crops and livestock for both local consumption and export markets while employing indigenous workers under conditions resembling slavery despite legal distinctions. The repartimiento system theoretically provided wage labor for public works and private enterprises, but Spanish employers frequently violated regulations regarding working conditions, payment schedules, and community obligations. Indigenous communities proved remarkably resilient in preserving cultural traditions despite centuries of colonial oppression. Traditional agricultural practices, craft production techniques, religious ceremonies, often disguised within Catholic frameworks, and social organization patterns maintained continuity with pre-conquest traditions while adapting to colonial circumstances. Indigenous languages survived and evolved, carrying with them worldviews and cultural knowledge that European colonization couldn't eradicate. Extended family networks, community governance structures, and shared cultural practices provided social cohesion, enabling collective survival through colonial period and beyond. The Spanish conquest thus marked not merely the end of indigenous political independence, but the beginning of new forms of cultural expression, social organization, and historical consciousness characterizing Latin American civilization through the present day. The story that began with Ice Age hunter-gatherers domesticating maize continued through Olmec colossal heads, Maya pyramid cities, and Aztec imperial expansion. That story didn't end in 1521. It transformed, adapted, and continues today in the millions of indigenous peoples throughout Mexico and Central America who maintain connections to their Mesoamerican heritage. Looking back across the vast sweep of Mesoamerican history, from those early farmers selecting better maize kernels around 7000 BC to the Spanish conquest in 1521 AD, certain patterns emerge that help us understand what made this civilization unique. Mesoamerica developed independently from Old World civilizations, yet achieved comparable sophistication in mathematics, astronomy, writing, architecture, and political organization. The independent invention of zero, complex calendrical systems, hieroglyphic writing, and urban planning principles demonstrates that human ingenuity and cultural development follow patterns transcending geographical boundaries. The agricultural foundation based on maize, beans, and squash provided economic basis for population growth and social complexity, but also created vulnerabilities. Dependence on maize monoculture meant that climate fluctuations, drought, or agricultural failure could trigger cascading social collapses. The Maya collapse around 800 AD likely involved agricultural intensification, pushing environmental systems beyond sustainable limits, while climate change stressed water resources. The Aztec Empire's expansion created tributary system extracting resources from subject populations, but also generated resentments that Spanish conquistadors would exploit with devastating effectiveness. Religion permeated every aspect of Mesoamerican life, connecting agricultural cycles with cosmic order through calendrical systems that integrated astronomical observations, mathematical calculations, and mythological narratives. The concept of cyclical time, where cosmic ages repeatedly created and destroyed, shaped political ideologies, emphasizing divine kingship and ritual sacrifice as necessary for maintaining universal order. Human sacrifice, while shocking to modern sensibilities, made perfect sense within Mesoamerican cosmological frameworks where gods required nourishment through blood offerings to continue their cosmic functions, enabling agricultural fertility and seasonal cycles. Warfare played crucial but complex roles in Mesoamerican political systems. While territorial conquest and tribute extraction motivated military campaigns, warfare also served religious functions through capture of sacrificial victims and validation of divine authority through battlefield success. The Aztec Empire's emphasis on flower wars, ritualized conflicts designed to capture enemies for sacrifice rather than achieve territorial conquest, demonstrates how military activities integrated with religious practices in ways fundamentally different from European warfare traditions focused on permanent territorial acquisition. Mesoamerican achievements in mathematics and astronomy rival contemporary accomplishments in any world region. The independent invention of zero as both numerical placeholder and mathematical concept enabled positional notation systems supporting complex calculations. Maya astronomers' calculations of Venus's synodic cycle, accurate to within minutes per century, achieved through generations of systematic naked-eye observations, demonstrate scientific methodology and intellectual rigor. With the long-count calendar's ability to record dates across millennia while maintaining precise correlation with multiple cyclical calendars shows mathematical sophistication, enabling both historical documentation and future prediction. Architectural achievements reflect sophisticated engineering knowledge, aesthetic sensibilities, and massive labor coordination. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, La Danta at El Mirador, and countless other monumental structures demonstrate capabilities for landscape modification, stone quarrying, transportation, and construction rivaling anything achieved in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. The precise astronomical alignments of buildings and ceremonial complexes show integration of mathematical knowledge, religious symbolism, and architectural design, creating built environments encoding cosmological principles. Writing systems developed independently in Mesoamerica, achieving full linguistic expression in Maya hieroglyphic script, while other regional traditions recorded historical, calendrical, and religious information. The decipherment of Maya hieroglyphics during the late 20th century revolutionized understanding by revealing that monumental inscriptions and codex manuscripts recorded complete texts including historical narratives, mythological accounts, astronomical calculations, and ritual prescriptions. This intellectual achievement demonstrates that pre-Columbian peoples possessed literature, history, and scientific knowledge comparable to literate civilizations elsewhere. Trade networks connected diverse ecological zones throughout Mesoamerica, facilitating exchange of goods, ideas, and cultural practices across vast distances. Obsidian from central Mexican sources appears throughout the Maya region. Marine shells traveled hundreds of kilometers inland. Cacao beans from tropical lowlands circulated as currency in highland markets. These commercial networks weren't merely economic but served as conduits for cultural transmission, political alliance formation, and artistic influence, spreading innovations throughout the region. The Pochteca merchant class in Aztec society combined commercial activities with diplomatic and intelligence functions, demonstrating how trade integrated with political systems in complex ways. The diversity within Mesoamerican civilization challenges simplistic narratives about ancient cultures. The Olmec, Zapotec, Maya, Teotihuacan, Toltec, Mixtec, Purepecha, and Aztec civilizations each developed distinctive cultural characteristics reflecting local, environmental conditions, historical trajectories, and cultural preferences. Yet, shared elements, including the 260-day ritual calendar, ball game traditions, feathered serpent deity, maize-based agriculture, and hieroglyphic writing systems, demonstrate cultural connections transcending political boundaries. This combination of diversity and commonality created a cultural sphere comparable to ancient Mediterranean civilizations where Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Near Eastern cultures maintained distinctive identities while sharing fundamental cultural frameworks. Gender roles in Mesoamerican societies varied considerably across cultures and time periods, but generally assigned men primary responsibilities for agriculture, warfare, and political leadership, while women controlled household production, textile manufacture, and market trade. However, this division wasn't absolute. Women occasionally assumed political leadership during succession crises, as demonstrated by Lady Six, Sky's 60-year reign at Naranjo. Women played crucial roles in religious ceremonies, particularly those involving textile production, food preparation, and fertility rituals. The importance of female deities in Mesoamerican pantheons, including maize goddesses, earth mothers, and supernatural weavers, reflects cultural recognition of women's essential contributions to social reproduction and economic production. Social stratification characterized all complex Mesoamerican societies, but operated differently from European feudal hierarchies. Hereditary nobility controlled political authority, religious offices and agricultural estates, but faced constant challenges from ambitious commoners achieving high status through military success, commercial wealth, or craft specialization. The Aztec system, providing opportunities for social mobility through military achievement, created meritocratic elements within hierarchical structures. Commoners who captured enemies in battle could receive noble titles, tribute rights, and economic privileges, enabling upward mobility across generations. Slavery existed throughout Mesoamerica but differed significantly from chattel slavery in European colonial systems. Slaves could own property, marry free persons, and have their children born free. Debt bondage, criminal punishment, and war captivity created slave populations performing domestic service, agricultural labor, and dangerous tasks like mining or construction. However, slaves retained certain legal protections and possibilities for manumission unavailable in later European colonial slavery systems. This doesn't minimize slavery's oppressive nature, but demonstrates that Mesoamerican social systems followed different principles from those familiar in European traditions. Archaeological research continues revealing new insights about Mesoamerican civilizations, challenging and refining our understanding of pre-Columbian societies. Recent excavations at El Mirador suggest that Maya civilization's fluorescence began earlier and involved larger populations than previously recognized. LiDAR technology, using laser scanning from aircraft to penetrate forest canopy, has revealed thousands of previously unknown Maya structures, demonstrating that population estimates for classic period Maya civilization were far too conservative. These discoveries suggest that Maya lands supported dense populations comparable to medieval European kingdoms while maintaining complex political systems and extensive agricultural infrastructure. Similarly, ongoing research at Teotihuacan using advanced geophysical survey techniques has revealed previously unknown tunnel systems, burial chambers, and residential compounds that illuminate the city's social organization and religious practices. The discovery of elite burial chambers within the Pyramid of the Moon containing sacrificial victims and elaborate offerings demonstrates that Teotihuacan practiced human sacrifice on scales previously associated primarily with Aztec civilization. These findings challenge earlier interpretations portraying Teotihuacan as a peaceful theocracy contrasting with militaristic societies like the Aztecs. The application of paleoclimate reconstruction techniques using tree rings, lake sediments, and stalagmite deposits has revolutionized understanding of environmental factors influencing Mesoamerican political developments. Evidence for severe droughts during Maya collapse period supports theories that environmental stress contributed to political fragmentation and demographic decline. Similarly, climate data indicating increased aridity during 7th century AD helps explain Teotihuacan's collapse. These environmental reconstructions demonstrate that Mesoamerican civilizations operated within ecological constraints that could suddenly shift due to climate change, creating cascading social crises. Genetic research analyzing ancient DNA from skeletal remains throughout Mesoamerica has revealed patterns of population movement, migration, and biological relationships between different cultural groups. These studies demonstrate that Mesoamerican populations experience continuous movement and genetic mixing while maintaining cultural distinctiveness through language, religion, and political organization. The biological diversity within Mesoamerican populations challenges earlier racial classifications while demonstrating complex patterns of human movement and cultural exchange throughout the region's history. The legacy of Mesoamerican civilization extends far beyond archaeological ruins and museum artifacts. An estimated 15–20 million people throughout Mexico and Central America speak indigenous languages descended from pre-Columbian linguistic traditions. Nahuatl, Maya languages, Zapotec, Mixtec, and dozens of other indigenous languages maintain continuity with ancient traditions while adapting to modern circumstances. These languages carry worldviews, cultural knowledge, and historical consciousness that European colonization couldn't eradicate. Traditional agricultural practices, craft production techniques, religious ceremonies, often syncretized with Catholic traditions, and social organization patterns maintain connections with pre-conquest traditions. In highland Guatemala, Maya communities continue using the 260-day ritual calendar for agricultural timing and ceremonial observances. In Oaxaca, Zapotec and Mixtec artisans produce textiles, pottery, and metalwork using techniques transmitted across generations since pre-Columbian times. These aren't museum reconstructions. These are living cultural practices connecting contemporary indigenous peoples with ancestors who built pyramid cities and created hieroglyphic manuscripts. The story of Mesoamerica challenges simplistic narratives about human progress and civilization. These cultures achieved remarkable sophistication in mathematics, astronomy, writing, architecture, and political organization through independent development following different trajectories from Old World civilizations. Their achievements demonstrate that human cultural development follows multiple pathways rather than single evolutionary sequences. The mathematical concept of zero, fully functional writing systems, astronomical calculations of extraordinary precision, and urban planning principles, all developed independently in Mesoamerica, show that human ingenuity transcends geographical boundaries. From those early farmers selecting better maize kernels around 7000 BC to the Spanish conquest in 1521 AD, Mesoamerican peoples created one of humanity's great civilizations. The colossal Olmec heads, Maya pyramid cities, Teotihuacan's grand avenues, Aztec floating gardens. These achievements inspire wonder precisely because they demonstrate what humans can accomplish through cultural cooperation, intellectual innovation, and sustained effort across generations. The story doesn't end with the Spanish conquest. It continues today in the millions of indigenous peoples maintaining connections to their Mesoamerican heritage while navigating contemporary challenges. Their resilience honors the ancestors who domesticated maize, carved hieroglyphs, calculated eclipses, and built pyramids that still stand as testament to human creativity and determination. If you've found this journey through Mesoamerican history as extraordinary as I have, please subscribe to Flow of History for more deep explorations of the civilizations that shaped our world.